You're listening to the On Pace Podcast, and I'm your host, James Fuller. As a banker by day, I've been serving people for over 20 years, and helping others is one of the things that I love most. While banking is my day job, other pleasures include being a husband, dad, musician, runner, and most recently, a private pilot. My goal in life is to be an example of the best husband, dad, and Christian that my wife can be thankful for and my son can look up to. Not to mention I want to be able to keep up with him for at least a few more years. This podcast was created with one goal in mind, and that is to help and inspire others. I want the On Pace Podcast to be motivational, encouraging, and educational. We will discuss topics of both personal and business nature, as well as interview individuals from various walks of life that have achieved some amazing things, all while overcoming challenges they faced and showing how they were able to build endurance. I encourage you to buckle up and enjoy the ride. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to the On Pace Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the On Pace Podcast. I'm your host, James Fuller, right here at the mic, and this is the 28th episode, so thank you for joining us for the 28th episode. If I remember right, this is the third one of 2025, so we're starting the year off strong, and hopefully slipping this one in before the end of January, so that'll be 3 in 1 month, so I'll be pretty happy about that. But other than that, the 28th episode, it's a pretty big deal. And my goal for this year, we averaged about, I think, 1 a month last year, 13 for the year. And so my goal this year is to try to double that, which would be 26 for the year. But we'll see where it goes from there. Maybe it'll be more than that. That's my hope anyway. So if you are watching us on YouTube, I do have this on YouTube as well. You may notice that my surroundings are a little different today, and I apologize if the video quality isn't as great as it could be. I am without a tripod, and I am using my phone, and so I may be looking off to the other direction, but if you're watching on YouTube, just bear with me. I will try to focus on looking over here at the phone from time to time. But I am actually in Chattanooga, good old Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my work has actually brought me here for a Smart Leadership kickoff tomorrow. And as I was having dinner this evening with some of my coworkers here in Chattanooga, got back to the hotel, got checked in, and I'll talk a little bit about the hotel in just a second, but decided that, hey, let's sit down and record a podcast. It's a beautiful hotel. I mean, honestly, I wish I could set up in the lobby. So if you're watching on YouTube, you could see just how pretty it is. If I can, I'll put some pictures and maybe a few little videos up in the corner of the video so you can see just how awesome this hotel is. So it's called the Reed House. It was established in 1872, so it's a very old hotel. And my understanding is that it also is haunted, or at least one of the rooms is haunted. And so I've not taken a tour of the room. You can actually tour the room, but because I'm only here for one day and we'll have to go out early in the morning to get to the bank, I will not have the opportunity to tour the room. So my hope is I will actually be back in a couple of weeks, and I'm hopeful that I would get to tour it then. So we'll see. But anyway, so the Reed House here in Chattanooga, and it's located on West MLK Boulevard here in Chattanooga, and I would highly encourage you to check it out. If you're coming to Chattanooga, come to Tennessee, there's a lot of stuff that you can do here in Chattanooga, and this is a great place to stay. I have been thoroughly impressed with the stay so far. Actually thought it was funny because we were at dinner and I had not even checked in yet. And I had already received a text from the hotel, and it was asking me how I was enjoying my stay so far. So they were really ahead of it because I hadn't even checked in yet. But I guess they just know that your check-in is at 3 o'clock, and they start soliciting you to make sure that you're happy with your stay so far. But they have valet. So there's a parking garage around the corner. And I don't know how much it is. I think it's like $10 or $15 to park there. And the valet was $28. So I'm like, well, I'll just do the valet. So I was able to unload my stuff right at the door and come on in and get checked in and really, like I said, enjoy my stay. It's a beautiful, beautiful room, beautiful hotel. And if you're once again, if you're on YouTube, you get to see a little bit of it behind me. If you're just listening on podcast, you just have to take my word for it. But anyway, so into the podcast episode for today. So just briefly, I want to talk a little bit about running shoes and the top 3 brands that I like, and how maybe to choose which one for you. Before we get started, though, I do want to encourage you to follow the podcast. So if you would like to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at Fuller Runs. That's my personal. You can follow the podcast at The On Pace Podcast, which is on.pace is the handle for Instagram. And then on Facebook, it's The On Pace Podcast. And so if you want to follow us on any of those platforms, you can do so. If you'd like to send an email, you can send an email to me at theonpacepodcast@icloud.com. That comes directly to me, and I will do my best to respond to you. I'd love to hear from you if you have any ideas on maybe some topics to talk about on the podcast, maybe some guests that you'd love to hear on the podcast, maybe some suggestions or feedback. I'd love to hear from you. And so I encourage you to shoot me an email or send me a message, and I'd love, once again, to hear from you. Another way you can help grow the podcast is, if you don't mind, go down to the bottom. You can do this while you're listening, as long as you're not driving. Go down to the bottom, and if you will like and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, so follow it, add it, however, and then leave a rating and review. And that rating and review is going to help the algorithms, whatever it is, that grows the podcast so more people see it. And I really appreciate the feedback, and hopefully it's a 5-star. We've got several 5 stars, and we've also got several reviews that have been written, and it would take maybe 20 or 30 seconds to a minute for you to do that, but it would really mean a lot to me if you would do that, so I really appreciate that. And then if you hear something on this podcast, this episode or any of the prior episodes, feel free to share that. Share it with other people that might be interested in listening to the podcast. I'd love to grow this podcast. I have obviously goals and aspirations of taking this to a much higher level, but you got to start somewhere. And one of the biggest things is consistency, and that's what I'm trying to be, is more consistent in my podcast recording. I've got some great topics coming. I've got a couple of guests that planning to have on, lined up, ready to go. And so I'm just trying to bring value and worth to you. And hopefully if you find that value, that worth, you will share it with others. So today's topic actually came to me because I received a text from a really good friend of mine. He actually helps me support with the Wobble Gobble 5K that I put on here in our local town, Tullahoma, for our chamber. And he owns a printing company and has printed our race bibs for the last 5 years that we've done the Wobble Gobble. And this morning he texted me and said, "Hey, I'm getting really serious about this. I want to know what shoes to buy." And so I obviously responded to him, told him, I said, more than happy to provide my opinion. That's all it is. We all know what opinions are. Everybody's got one. But I did want to give him some content that felt like he could find useful and apply it however he saw fit. And then I decided, hey, this is great content to share with listeners on the podcast. And so this is strictly my opinion. So don't hate on me if you disagree. I understand. I disagree with many, just like many probably disagree with me. But this is just what I have learned over the years. I have been running probably since about 2011. So 14 years that I've been running, and I've learned a lot. I've learned mistakes. I've hopefully learned from those mistakes. But I've also learned what works for me. And so I just want to share that with you. So today's topic is going to be the top 3 brands that I prefer in running shoes. And I'll come out of the gate with, I encourage you, no matter what, to find a place that can fit you for the shoes before you ever get started. And the reason I say that is because you may think you know what size you wear, but until you have been properly fitted, it's very difficult to know for sure that you are getting the right size. You may run into if your shoes do not properly fit, or you could have your toes jamming into the front of the shoe. This could cause you to lose some toenails. There's all kinds of things there. You may not have the proper support to your foot. That can in turn lead to shin splints and other possible injuries. So it's very important that you get fitted for the proper size shoe. The other side of that is shoes are going to differ from brand to brand. And so once you find the shoe that you like, you may also need to just verify that, hey, this is the right size for this brand of shoe. I'll use this as an example. Nike for me typically runs a little smaller than other shoes. And so I might have to go up a half a size in Nike to be able to fit my foot. And so going back, please make sure that you seek a professional fitting. And I would encourage you, if you're local to the area, we have a great shoe store here in Tullahoma called Clayton's Family Shoe. It's actually the oldest shoe store in Tennessee, and it may be in the country, but I could be wrong on that. I know it's in Tennessee. But Florence Hull does a phenomenal job, and I would encourage you to go in. She's got several brands that she sells there, and so you could go and get fitted. If you are not local to Tullahoma, one of the other locations that I'm very familiar with in the running world is Fleet Feet, and there's several locations across the nation. So if you're in the Murfreesboro area, the Nashville area, even down into Huntsville, I have been into the Madison location when I ran a race down there. They're wonderful people, very nice, and they will do a great job in fitting you. So both of those are my recommendations for places to go to be fit for your size shoe. Once you've done that, and obviously if you could purchase it from them, that would be wonderful because they're going through that time and effort to get you fitted. They may not carry the shoe that you want. And if that's the case, then obviously you can walk away with at least the knowledge of what size shoe to wear. And then you hopefully can find the shoe that works for you. Now into the brands of shoes that I prefer. Those are my top 3 and the reasons why. So I originally started running before I knew anything. I originally started with a cheap pair of Adidas cross-training shoes, tennis shoes, what we would call them. And at the time, I thought that's what you did. I thought you just threw on a pair of shoes and run. And if you're just getting started, that's perfectly fine. But if you are getting into situations where you have shin splints or your legs hurt or your feet hurt or once again, your toes, you're starting to see blackening of the toenails or your toes are hurting, it's very possible that you do not have the right fit shoe or the shoe is not designed for what you're doing. And so that's where I would encourage you to then start looking at some other brands as well as some other models that are specifically for running. And that would obviously, hopefully help. So whenever I realized that there might be a need to look at some other shoes, I started searching. The first brand of shoe that I came to after my original OG Adidas was Brooks. And so I would say that Brooks is one of my top 3 brands. It's not my top brand, but it is one of my top 3 brands of shoes that I will wear. So I started out with a pair of Ghost, and they've got several iterations of the Ghost shoe today. But I will say that one thing I love about Brooks is they are a very durable shoe. So if you're looking for something that's going to last a long time, the Brooks shoe is definitely a go-to for me on something that is going to have that longevity of life. My Ghost Brooks shoes that I have, I've got over 600 miles on those shoes, and they still look like they just came out of the box. Now, I do keep them in the original box, so I take very good care of my running shoes. I do not wear them other than for running. So it's not like I throw on a pair of running shoes and then wear them through the day or at work or, my running shoes are running shoes only, and then they stay in the box or in my closet whenever I'm not running. And that just allows the life to obviously be extended. It also allows you to better track the amount of miles you have on them. So I use Strava as my fitness tracker for running. And in Strava, you can add the gear or the shoes that you wear. And as you are running and putting activities on your Strava account, you can tie that activity to a particular shoe. And that's how I track the number of miles that I have on my shoes. And so those Ghost shoes that I mentioned, my very first Brooks Ghost shoes, I've got over 600 miles on those, and they still look great. And so Brooks is definitely, like I said, a go-to if you're looking for something that's durable. A couple of other models that Brooks carry that you might also want to look into is they have the Brooks Launch, which the Launch ones that I have are a Victory series. So they're an American. They've got stars and blue on one shoe and then red and white stripes on the other. So I like to wear those around the 4th of July, Memorial Day, all those wonderful patriotic holidays. I will wear those shoes with whatever patriotic kit I have for that time. Another one is the Brooks Levitate, and there will be some special editions of the Levitates as well. I was able to pick up a pair of the Ugly Sweater Levitates, so I wear them typically during the month of December. And these are the only pair of shoes that I will make an exception for where I will wear them outside of running. Because they only get worn in December, I'm not putting a ton of miles on them. And so I will usually wear them from time to time if I'm going somewhere, go maybe to work. If we're having an ugly sweater day, I'll throw on the ugly sweater shoes to go with it. But the Levitate model is a great, and model may not be the best word, but type of shoe. I'm just going to go with model, and y'all forgive me if I'm wrong. But so I've got the Brooks Ghosts, the Brooks Launch, and then the Brooks Levitate. And so those are the 3 models of Brooks shoes that I would recommend. The next brand that I would also potentially recommend to you if you're considering a shoe would be the Hokas. And Hokas are considered more of a stable shoe. They're typically a wider toe box. So if you have a wide foot or you like to have more room width-wise in your toe box area, Hoka is probably a good fit for you. If you're also a larger person or you carry a lot of weight or maybe you're tall or you feel uneasy with some of the other shoes, Nike can be known for somewhat of a narrower sole. Hoka is going to provide you that wider sole to feel more stable in your run. I would put Hoka in the middle of the durability category, so they're not probably going to last quite as long as the Brooks, in my opinion. They do have some lines that would last longer. I do have one pair. They are called the Speed Goats, and I think they're the Speed Goat 3. They are a heavier shoe, and they're very similar to my Ghost Brooks. But they have, I think it's the Vibram technology on the sole, so they have very good traction, and they are my go-to for a trail shoe. But they have a very wide sole. The inside of the shoe has plenty of width for my foot. And so Hoka provides a wonderful solution if you're looking for something that's kind of middle of durability. If you wanted to step into a slightly faster shoe on the street running, non-trail related, I currently have the Hoka Carbon X2. And it has a carbon plate, so it was one of the first Hoka shoes to include a carbon plate in the sole, which allows a little more of a spring in your step as you're running. I have found them not quite to be as fast as Nike's brand, but they do offer a great tempo shoe in that Carbon X2 if you're looking for something maybe for a longer distance. So when I do my training and say I've got a 12 to 15, maybe 16 mile run, and I want to push the pace a little bit but not too fast, a lot of times I'll go for that Hoka Carbon X2. And so that's a wonderful option if you're looking for maybe a tempo shoe that's not quite as heavy, and also has a little bit of that extra kick with that carbon plate. So once again, that's Hoka. I've got the Speed Goats, and I did look, I've got the Speed Goat 4s, and then also the Carbon X2. And so that's the 2 brands so far. We've got Brooks and Hoka. I do want to throw in an honorable mention here. I do have a couple of Saucony, And that's how I pronounce it. You may pronounce it differently, and I apologize. Saucony, however you want to pronounce it. But I do want to give an honorable mention because I do have a pair of the Saucony or Saucony Endorphin Speeds, and those are a great shoe. They're kind of like that Hoka Carbon X2. I'll wear them if I want something that's got a little bit more ability for a tempo. But not necessarily a race shoe. The sole on the Sauconys or the Sauconys, they typically don't last quite as long, at least in the pair I have. If you look at the bottom, they almost look more like a styrofoam material, and there is a rubber coating, obviously, that is the tread of the shoe that contacts the ground. But in my experience, the longevity, I just don't see them lasting more than maybe 350 to 400 miles. I only have one pair of shoes in this brand, but I did want to throw it out as an honorable mention. Now, to the last brand of shoe, and this is obviously, you may have picked up on this already if you've been listening. The last brand that I prefer, and I typically will go to, is Nike. Nike obviously made a bunch of splash when they started creating the super shoes. There was a lot of drama and a lot of just frustration, I think, from people that didn't know what Nike was doing, didn't think it was fair. They're thinking of all of the athletes that have set records in the past. My personal opinion of this, Nike is a very forward technology thinking shoe company. They are trying to advance shoes in such a way that it allows the athlete to safely and efficiently run, and obviously in that run be very efficient. One of their biggest things was the carbon plate that I mentioned in Hoka. Nike was one of the leaders of that when they came out with their Vaporfly shoe. The Vaporfly has obviously grown. They've got several different versions of it now. But that was kind of what created all of the drama around the Nike brand. I personally still choose to run with Nike. I can put on two different pairs of shoes. I can put on a Nike and then maybe I can put on, say, the Brooks. And if I am in the same fit filling, if I'm trained at a certain level, I do feel as though the Nike gives me a slight advantage as I'm giving that kick. It's almost like I've got a little more spring in my step, so my legs don't tire quite as quickly, and therefore I feel like I can endure the run a little longer. So that's what I think Nike brings with their technology of the shoe. And some of the models that I have of Nike, so I originally started with the Pegasus Turbo, the Pegasus Turbo, Pegasus Turbo 2. Those are my first two real Nike shoes. Thanks to Mandy, she gifted those to me for Christmas, and the rest was history. I pretty much bought Nike exclusively since then. But then after that, I moved into some other models. So there's also the Vaporfly. So I bought the original, I think Vaporfly Next Percent is what I purchased as my first real race shoe. And really enjoyed the shoe. I will say my only complaint is, since it has the ZoomX sole, it is not something that's very durable. So most of the shoes that I'm going to mention in the Nike world, with the exception of maybe one or two, they're not going to give you the durability of the Brooks or even the Hoka that I mentioned. The problem is if you're going for speed, which the shoes that I have in the Nike brand are more of a speed or up-tempo shoe, or even just straight up a race day shoe, they're not meant to be worn as a daily trainer that you're putting 50, 60 miles every week on that same shoe. So typically what I will do is I will train in all these other different shoes, and then I've got my race shoes that I will run in for, say, the maybe build up of maybe a week or two out. I'll do a few training runs in them, and then obviously have my race day shoes. Some other models of Nike is I really like the Invincible, so I'll go ahead and mention those. So there's a brand. I believe it's called the Zoom X Invincibles. The model is the Zoom X Invincibles. They've got a fly knit upper. Really enjoy those. They are one of the only Nike shoes that I feel is a very durable shoe. So it does have some Zoom X sole, but there's a lot more rubber and protection on the bottom. And so they're built to endure more of that, day-to-day training. So the Invincibles, as well as the Myler Reacts 2. So those are very, very similar shoe. I believe one of them has React foam instead of the Zoom X foam. But both of those, the Nike Myler React 2 and the Zoom X Invincibles, I highly recommend those if you're looking for a Nike shoe that's a little more durable. They also have a wider base, and so as a tall person that's larger, heavier, carrying more weight, I like a wider base. And so for those, they fit that build. A couple of other models that I like. I did upgrade my Vaporfly Next Percents to the Next Percent 2s, and I actually bought those and a pair of Alphaflys at the same time. They're in the same colorway. They're an orange colorway, so if you know me, you know I love orange. Go Vols. And so I bought both of those at the same time, and I've actually run marathons and half marathons in those shoes. And so those are my go-to race models. Would be the Next Percent 2 and the Alphaflys. I've really transitioned to just wearing the Alphaflys if it is a race that I really want to go out and set a good pace and honestly just go full send. So I have really enjoyed those Alphaflys. They don't have the durability, but what sets the Alphaflys a little different from the Next Percent 2s, they have two air pods that are at the toe of kind of on the ball of the foot, so just under the toe box. And those air pods are once again supposed to help with, just help the runner have cushion between them and the ground, and it goes back to your legs don't feel as tired. You've got a little more of a bounce or a spring in that stride, and so that's why I really like those Alphaflys. They have the carbon plate as well and the Zoom X foam. So if you're looking for the race brand model that I go to, it's a Nike Alphafly, and I really like those. The Vaporfly is a slightly cheaper option, the Next Percent 2. It's a slightly cheaper option than the Alphafly, but also a very quality race shoe, so you couldn't go wrong with either of those. I personally feel like the Alphafly may have a little more longevity than the Next Percent 2 because there is a little more rubber on the bottom of that Zoom X sole. So if you are looking between those two and you want something that may be a little more durable, the Alphafly I think would be a little more durable in that case. Let's see. The only other honorable mentions, no, not honorable mentions, but the only other models I was going to mention under the Nike, there is also the Zoom Fly. They've come out with several versions that I think they're either on 4 or 5 now. It's a great training shoe. It kind of is similar to the Vaporfly Next Percent, but it's not quite the same. The upper's a little different, and as obviously the sole is as well. It does have more rubber cushion on the bottom, and so that's why it has that more durable, the durableness to it. So the second one that I was going to mention that I have is the Tempo Next Percent. And that Tempo Next Percent by Nike is also a really good training shoe. I did use that in a marathon training that I did a couple of years ago. And it was more of my 7 to 7:15 minute pace shoe. So if I had either a 3 or a 6 mile run where I needed to maintain a low 7-minute pace, that was usually the one I would go for. It has a similar feel to the Alphafly. It's got the 2 air pockets at the toe as well under the ball of the foot. And so I highly would recommend that Next Percent, the Tempo Next Percent, if you're looking for something that's a little step below the Vaporflies or the Alphaflies, but still want something that's a good trainer. So in summary, if you didn't figure it, Nike is my number one. I would probably put Brooks as my number 2. I do gravitate more to the Brooks whenever I am grabbing a training shoe for a run. And then I would list Hoka as my 3rd top brand. And then, of course, like I said, the honorable mention, Saucony or Saucony, whichever way you say it. So technically, I guess it was a top 4. But top 3, Nike, Brooks, and Hoka. Hopefully the information that I discussed in this podcast, you can apply if you're asking those questions of, hey, what shoe should I go with? What's something you would recommend? Once again, I can't stress enough, get properly fitted, and what works for me may not work for you. So all I am saying is this is the brands that I like. And this is what has worked for me in my now 14 to 15 years of running. But what works for you could be different. And so the really only way I can tell you to go about it is to just get out there and try some. Go to your local shoe store, go to a location that provides multiple brands. Like I mentioned, if you're in Murfreesboro, Nashville, even down in Huntsville, surrounding areas of the nation, Fleet Feet has a large selection of multiple brands. So if you're looking for multiple different brands to try, I would recommend you looking at that, or your local shoe store. Like I said, we have some wonderful local shoe stores that are owned by families that would be more than happy to take the time, sit down with you, get you properly fitted, get you trying on some shoes and seeing if they can find that right shoe for you. Until you try it, until you test it out, till you run the aisle of the store, or maybe take it home and go on a few training runs, you're really not going to know what works for you. You may buy a pair of shoes and try it for a month or so, and it just doesn't work for you. That's okay. You've learned a lesson, and then move on to something else. Just because I said Nike, Brooks, and Hoka, doesn't mean those are the brands you have to go with. But I do think that if you're looking for quality shoe, you can listen to this podcast again and listen to the ones that are durable, the ones that are race worthy, and find the shoe for whatever your need is, whatever your level of running is, whatever pace you're trying to set, you can find the shoe for you. So thanks for tuning in to the On Pace podcast. Once again, this was the 28th episode. I really appreciate you listening. Please share this with someone. If you've got someone in your life that you feel like might benefit from this episode or any of our prior episodes, please share them. That's the only way we can spread the podcast. Also, if you want to follow us on social media, once again, you can follow us on Instagram at on.pace. You can follow us on Facebook at the On Pace Podcast. If you'd like to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Fuller Runs, and then also on YouTube, you can search Fuller Runs for both personal video content as well as the podcast content. And so that's a wonderful place that you can go and watch the videos. And then you can email me once again at theonpacepodcast@icloud.com. Any of those methods, I would love to hear from you. I just want your feedback. Let me know what you like. Give me some ideas on content, guests, you name it. I am asking you to reach out and let me know. The last thing I'm going to mention before I let you go, there's a new feature that my wonderful host, Buzz Sprout, has allowed me to add, and that is a support the show. And I've not really expounded upon this too much in prior episodes this year, but I just want to take a quick minute. If you are interested in supporting the show at any dollar amount, I think the lowest dollar amount is $3 a month. And you could give $3 a month. My hosting bill for this is not that much, but my goal of putting this support the show out there is to just try to absorb some of the cost in that through donations. And so if you'd like to make a monthly contribution, you can do that. If you would just like to send a one-time contribution, reach out to me either by social media or email. I can give you my Venmo, Cash App, you name it. If you'd like to make a donation to help grow this podcast, all of it's going to be obviously poured into trying to make this podcast better. And so I would love to have you be a part of that. If you make a donation either one time or through the support the show link at the bottom of the show notes, I will obviously mention you as a supporter of the show in future episodes. And so get your support in, and I will make sure to give you a shout out on future episodes. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, I hope you find your pace and stick to it. Take care.